Book discussion, Therese Anne Fowler, A Good Neighborhood. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. I want to discuss the book, my thoughts about it, but before I go into the discussion, I just want to say this is another great example of the necessity of reading as a conditioning of your brain. This book is about racial issues and justice issues in America today. I have taken certain stances that are discussed in this book that made me rethink now my own stance. And it's just a beautiful example of how important reading and novels are in terms of training your mind, conditioning your mind, framing ideas, framing thoughts, framing discussion points. And this podcast, this episode, is an attempt to frame my somewhat altered discussion point about race and justice in the United States. This is the Not Even Wrong podcast. It's April 25th, 2021. This is Delco. It's a Sunday. There's no update. So for the year, we're up 2.2%. The market's up 10.5%. We're underperforming by 8.3%. Now, this is a book discussion, and it is a political, racial, and justice type of discussion. There really isn't a direct relationship here with the business. So I want to just put this up front. I think the one relationship I see with the business here is what I've been always saying is that reading is not just something you do as a hedge fund manager because it helps or something like that. It is the thing you do. Reading is the thing you do because it's conditioning our mind. It is helping us understand how we even think, and it helps us shape our mind the same way conditioning training helps us shape our body. Yoga and stretching helps us shape our body the same way reading is this conditioning of the brain. And without that, you cannot make money in the market. Let's leave it at that. And now let's jump in the book. This book is about two main issues. There's a couple of undercurrents I want to touch upon, but the main issue here is first and foremost the discussion of racial justice in the United States. It is the discussion. The book is touching upon issues that are at center front in today's conversation about race and justice in the United States. Here's a short version of the plot. We have a half white, half black teenager, a male teenager, a man named Xavier, and he falls in love with a 17-year-old white girl in North Carolina. They fall in love. They have sex together. The man gets accused of date rape and other things. He faces multiple decades of prison. The girl is clearly convinced that she was not manipulated or date raped or anything like that, that she was absolutely free of any kind of coercion. But justice takes its course. The story goes on. I'm not going to give away the end or anything like that, so don't worry. I just want to leave it at that and just discuss this part of the point. And then there's some other undercurrents here. But I think what Therese Anne Fowler here is trying to point out in this book through the storytelling is just simply how justice can go the wrong way. This is almost Kafkaesque in a sense that you have a starting point of maybe a conversation you could have, which is, okay, fine, there is a 19, 20-year-old boy that is seducing a 17-year-old girl. There is questions of statutory rape. It's questions of where should they have sex and all that stuff. But then it turns into a Kafkaesque, really bizarre situation where all of a sudden the boy is being accused of a terrible, terrible crime. The girl is being not just accused of being a victim, and I'm using the word accused of being a victim, which is almost an oxymoron, but it's not, because the girl is being treated as if she can't express herself, because the girl is 100% convinced that she wasn't coerced. This was a very regular date. She had no intentions whatsoever to not have sex or anything like that. But then this whole thing turned into, well, listen, honey, you're too young to understand. You're traumatized. All that stuff. It's terrible, and that is, I think, the fundamental conversation in this whole book. I think it's a terrifying story because even if it doesn't happen, I mean, I don't know if this is anecdotal, if it really happens. I don't know the statistics, but just it's like when I read Kafka in high school back in Switzerland, and we were reading this typical or what is Kafka? The way I understand Kafka is just simply that things can the authoritarian state can take its own dynamics and it can accelerate its own dynamics to the point where you can't stop it, and you end up in a place that you didn't even know that you can end up. You can start somewhere, and through the legal bureaucratic system of any kind of authoritarian state, it doesn't have to be a Nazi 1930s style fascist or communist state, it could be even our democracy, but we can end up in places that we just don't want to be. And this is a similar story. I think we've all heard anecdotal evidence, because this is also the story about a half white, half black, so meaning black men, because if you're half white, half black in the South, according to this in this novel also, and I think, again, this is probably nothing shocking to people that you are considered black, and if you're considered black and you have sex with a white girl and she's underage, that is just not a good idea. So this is the story, and it just made me rethink the idea of social justice and social and racial justice in the United States. I was, to be fair, living in San Francisco in the last couple of years, getting a bit tired of social justice warriors. I'm definitely not a friend of all these movements that are encompassing our society right now, simply for the following reason. First and foremost, I don't want people to tell me how to think and how to talk. So one of the biggest concerns I have is this people having the audacity to tell me how to think and how to talk and how to dress and how to do things. Also with COVID now, I have to wear a mask, I have to wear this, I have to wear that. All these things I'm just completely opposed to, and that doesn't mean I'm opposed to social justice, and that doesn't mean I'm opposed to discussing and thinking about suppressed racial issues and suppression and all that stuff. I just cannot, nobody has access to my freedom, nobody has access to my wealth, nobody has access to my behavior. I decide what I do, I decide how I behave, I decide what it is I'm going to do, and then I'm going to bear the consequences and pay the price. Nobody has the right to tell me. There's no such thing as some arbiter of truth or social justice. Where whoever they are, these people don't have. I'm not even letting them have that conversation. Forget about accepting them. So, having said that, I am obviously very concerned reading this book, A Good Neighborhood, because there are things I've not seen. There are things I've not been exposed to. And this is one of the biggest takeaways of this book, is that, look, things that you don't experience yourself, things that you just don't see yourself, you can't know them. Like, I cannot understand how it is to be a black person in the United States. I just can't, because I'm not. I don't know how they feel when they stop by the police. I don't know how they feel when, God forbid, they have sex with a girl that is underage or even not underage, and then all of a sudden rape accusation come up and things like that. I just don't know how that feels. End of story. It's not about, oh my, well, yeah, I understand how they feel. I don't. So it's very important to acknowledge that. It's important to acknowledge, I don't know how it feels to be a woman. Right? Another thing I've often discussed with my friends in the jiu-jitsu community is that, you know, when you're on the mat with a guy, I'm 175, 180 pounds. That's what I walk around. When I'm on the mat with a 230, 250 pound guy, it's terrifying. Even on the jiu-jitsu mat, which is usually a very friendly place, of course, friendly in the context of combat, but it's still friendly. Like, nobody's gonna go hurt you most of the time. You're still terrified. And then you think about it, every woman standing in an elevator or sitting in a restaurant next to me probably feels like terrified like that, because I'm a giant compared to most women. So anyway, I don't know how that feels. I don't know how it feels to be a woman sitting next to me. I just don't know. I can think about it, like I said, maybe when I'm on the mat with a big guy, and I feel like the guy has strength over me or something like that. I can kind of feel. But again, the big takeaway here is we just don't know how it feels to be in the skin of somebody, particularly when they have issues such as, let's say, justice issues. We, meaning we, with the people who are not affected by, let's say, being black or having social justice issues, we just don't know how that feels. And that let's leave it at that. We just don't know how that feels. Now, and another aspect that comes through in the story is the aspect of profiteering, of opportunistic behavior, of taking advantage of the system. And I think this almost has to come with the story. You cannot have a story about social justice without some guy trying to take advantage of, let's say, political connections, money. In this particular story, it's a kind of a circle almost, where the people around this particular black man, again, half white, half black. I'm going to call Xavier black, even though he's half, and I personally don't want to judge either way. I think somebody who's biracial is biracial, but let's call him black just for the sake of simplicity here. So this person, Xavier, his mother is trying to profit from situations. His opponent, there's a protagonist that is clearly opposed to him, is taking advantage of him. There is this circle of trying to take advantage of each other, and those attempts all end up in disaster in the end. I mean, and that to me, it's kind of a sideshow in a sense that, look, it's not concerning, it's not killing me if, let's say in this case, somebody starts a lawsuit, which in my view is not really warranted, tries to extort a lot of money, and then ends up winning and then having money, but then loses other things which are much more valuable than money, and stuff like that. I think, to me, that's not something I want to discuss in a sense that that's really a heavy load on my shoulders. I just want to point this out. I think there's a third current in the story, which is love, just pure and simple love. What is love? What does it actually mean to be in love with somebody? And how can it be interpreted or misinterpreted by people? And I think the fundamental takeaway here is that it is nobody's business who is in love with who, except the people who are exposed to that. And that is, again, something that comes back to the social justice conversation. It is none of my business to judge anybody who's in love with anybody. Man with man, woman with man, trans, hetero, homo, whatever it is none of my business, simply because I don't understand how it feels to be in love with somebody other than the person that I am personally in love with, which is my wife. So that is, I think that's kind of in general how I see this book. Highly recommended, great book, entertaining, not very complicated in a sense. This is not your Dostoevsky literature here. It's contemporary, it's decent in terms of intellectual capacity. It's not a, anyway, who cares if it's intellectual or not. My point here is that it is heavy on content but light on language, so it's digestible, but it's heavy because what you're actually taking in has a heavy toll on I think, on my consciousness. Excuse me. So to summarize, A Good Neighborhood is a book about the conversation of social justice and racial issues in the United States. It is also a conversation of whose business it is to make judgment about other people, and in general the conclusion is that it's nobody's business to judge anybody else. Now this applies to the people, the protagonists in this book, which are the cause of social injustice, as much as it applies, in my view, to the people who are propagating social justice. It is nobody's business how I think, how I talk, and what I do. What it is, it's my duty to do the right thing in the context of how can I live a life that is not hurting other people other than if I break the law or if I deliberately try to harm them. Now, of course, you might say, well, that's a fine line. If I, let's say, call somebody black, I might hurt their feelings. Well, the point here is that there is a certain base of rules of engagement that we all have to agree with. We can't live in anarchy. We can't also live in totalitarian linguistic, or even worse, totalitarian regimes, because that doesn't work. So we have to give ourselves the freedom to express ourselves and talk and behave in certain ways that fit our own purposes within the context, again, of the law of the land, but also of the rules of engagement, which should be lined out in such a way that we can all breathe and live. And I think where this conversation of social justice is going, and by the way, this is not propagated in the book. I think the book is very clear about that. I would say I agree with the author here. She ends the book with the beginning is the most important thing. Let's start the conversation. Let's think about it. And this is exactly what I'm doing here. I'm having a conversation about the necessity to think, let's say, about the social, about the justice process when it comes to young black men being accused of things. This is a conversation we should be having. And I'm happy to start thinking about it, because I haven't been thinking about it, because I don't even know how it feels to be a black man exposed to justice issues in the United States. So I'm very happy to have that conversation, listen to. Again, what I'm not going to accept is anybody telling me how to think or what to do. The whatever amendments there are in our Constitution in terms of free speech and things like that, to me, they are sacrosanct, not because I'm a traditionalist or anything like that. It's just simply this is how the whole thing works. And now I want to finish this episode with I think the most important thing, and this comes along a lot in the Not Even Wrong podcast, which is Karl Popper, David Deutsch, and the necessity to have debate, critical thinking, explanatory power, or like Brett Hall calls it, the nexus, where we have explanatory power, computation, thinking, mind. All these things come together in a sense that the only way we can progress in life, and we can have progress in morals, in laws, in thinking, we can have progress in social justice. Everything can progress. What we cannot have is statics. We cannot just sit there and say, this is how it is. We're just not going to use the English language anymore the way we use it. We can debate, for example, if it's okay to call somebody black. And we can find better words for that. I'm absolutely all for that. But first and foremost, I would like black people, of course, to be involved in that conversation. And if they have a negative, let's say, feeling towards that, I'm happy to change to colored, or even not even talk about it. But then, what if we don't talk about it? Well, then we're kind of neglecting their plight, and therefore we have to talk about it. So we have to find, I'm all like Karl Popper, which is, let's have a debate, let's have pros and cons, and then let's have a better ideas, better words, better solutions, better expressions, better solutions to problems that we have. I think society can have problems the same way technology can have problems, and solutions can be found the same way we can find solutions in technology. It's not exactly engineering like very often in technology, but it is still, we can have solutions. We can have a solution for social justice. First of all, but we have to define the problem. The problem has to be defined. It has to be measurable in a certain way that we can also talk about the problem and find solutions that are better than existing solutions. And this is where a lot of, let's say, social justice warriors lose me, whereas they don't have a good explanation of what the problem is. They don't have a good solution for the problem because they don't even have a good explanation for what it is. And therefore, they're starting to use a certain topic to enhance their own political agenda, and that's bad for, of course, for society, but it's also bad for the people who are affected, because then they're just being sort of victimized or taken hostage by the social justice movement. So again, to summarize, I think this book is highly recommended. It is particularly important for people that maybe have been standing a little bit off that whole conversation, in a sense that, let's say, they've been either tired of it, or they didn't want to be involved in any kind of right-left social justice type conversation. I think it's a very measured book. It's a very balanced book. It raises the right questions. It raises the right topics, and it's a very nice introduction to the thinking and the discussion. And like the author says in the end, the most important thing is to start the discussion. And I'm happy to do it. And this book has helped me to do that. Thank you.